Well, good morning, everyone, and everyone on Zoom. It's always a pleasure to be here speaking, even when we're kind of distanced and behind masks and or at a definite distance on Zoom. Last week, Tom Volpes spoke, and he was going to make a joke because we were talking about how lucky the people watching on Zoom are because they can be in their pajamas drinking their coffee, and the rest of us sitting here in the service are behind masks and distanced and kind of dressed up. I'm even wearing my gold shoes. So, anyway, Tom was going to wear his bathrobe last week to church, but then he decided maybe that wasn't such a good plan after all. But it would have been fun, I think, maybe for Halloween, if we're still doing Zoom, we should all come in pajamas. So the theme this month is deepening our understanding. And in the past, I've had various speakers complain to me about why, they have to be the last one for the month. Because by the time we get to the last person in the month, we have already talked about the theme so much with at least 3 and possibly 4 other speakers that they feel like it's kind of exhausted. And so I thought, well, that's maybe true in a way. We were lucky this month. Roger Harvey led us off in deepening our understanding with a discussion of unity and Charles Fillmore's teaching about understanding. And then Janine came along and did a great Bible story and more deepening our understanding, and talked to us about Thomas and Huldah the prophetess, and even had pictures, not authentic, I don't think, but depictions of what they may have looked like when they were walking on this earth. And then last week, Tom Volpes, who said he loved the theme, deepening our understanding, because he felt like that was one of the most important things we could talk about and learn about, was to deepen our own understanding. Well, after all of this, I decided maybe it was my role to move into the bridge from understanding to compassion. Because I realized in my life that when I am really willing to understand where another person is coming from, I can, with willingness, move into compassion. I started with reviewing the book Power Up by Reverend Paul Hasselbeck. He said there is two kinds of understanding. There is spiritual understanding and intellectual understanding. Most of us think, in our physical lives, all we need to do is work on intellectual understanding, which Paul says is based on, I think, and he's also quoting Charles Fillmore, intellectual understanding is the relative or physical realm. Intellectual understanding is mostly gained through experience, the school of hard knocks. Sometimes we're not willing to have that intellectual understanding until we're kind of thrown up against the wall and we have to go there. By combining our reasoning with intellectual understanding, we are able to arrive at valid, practical conclusions. But then when we get a little further along our path, sometimes we're willing to go into spiritual understanding. And I think this is the deepening of our understanding that was the purpose of the Speakers Committee this month, to help us move from intellectual understanding into spiritual understanding. And this type of understanding is gained by spending time in the silence, spending time in prayer and meditation. As Paul says, This type of knowledge sometimes includes and always transcends intellectual understanding. It comes as an internal knowing, or perhaps a still small voice. And so spiritual understanding is what we really want. Next, I moved on to the book called 12 Powers in You, written by Reverend David Williamson and his wife many, many years ago. Unfortunately, it's out of print. But it has been a great tool for me to understand and get the 12 powers and how we use them in our lives. The 12 powers was something that Charles Fillmore really pushed and felt that all humans have 12 innate physical powers. In the book 12 Powers in You, the Williamsons talk about us as being trees. And each one of our 12 powers is a branch that reaches out into the world. And if we have those branches, if we have all 12 of our powers in balance, then our tree is balanced. And no wind can blow us over or harm us. And so our goal is to balance our 12 powers. He says that evil comes in the world when our 12 powers are out of balance and we're just leaning on one side or the other side and not really keeping our awareness on all 12. Faith, strength, wisdom, love, dominion, imagination, understanding, will, order, zeal, release or renunciation, and life. So all 12 of those powers come into balance, and that's what we're striving for. And I think we can really make that happen when we move into our spiritual understanding through the power of prayer and meditation, tuning into the silence. In the book, 12 Powers in You, they review the story of Thomas, who was the one who needed to be given physical proof that Jesus had resurrected. And Janine did a great job of talking about that a couple of weeks back. Well, they also talked about Saul and his conversion on the road to Damascus. So I had to review that. You may remember that Saul, or Paul as he came to be known later on after his conversion, Saul was a zealot against the Christians. He was busy persecuting anybody who professed to believe in Jesus. He was, in fact, had gotten permission to travel to Damascus so that he could continue his war against the Christians, this outlaw sect who was following a man called Jesus. According to the Metaphysical Bible, Damascus is a symbol of the physical pleasure of all things. Well, Saul had gotten caught up in his egoistic self and derived physical pleasure from tormenting the people who were trying to follow Jesus. And he was in denial that he was doing anything wrong. He was justified. He was living in the wisdom of his ego for sure, and using his strength, maybe not using any love. He was definitely zealous, but he was lacking in understanding. And it says in the Bible, on the road to Damascus, this is from Acts chapter 9, Saul was on the road, and all of a sudden he had a vision of a bright light coming down from the sky. Now, I don't know whether this happened at night and it was a dream, or whether it actually happened during the day and he was just struck by this. But there was this bright light coming down from the sky, and he heard a voice say, "Why do you persecute me?" Now, Saul was, struck dumb by this. He didn't know. He finally said, who is it that's talking to me? And the voice identified itself as Jesus. Now, Saul didn't believe, of course. He couldn't believe that this was happening, but the physical evidence was so overwhelming and the light was so bright that he was struck blind. He couldn't see to continue the journey. And he didn't know what to do. Well, luckily enough, the men that were traveling there with him helped him, and they did make it to Damascus. Well, Saul was there for 3 days, still blind, still unable to take care of himself. He had to rely on other people. He couldn't go out and persecute Christians. All he could do was just sit quietly and wait, hoping that something would happen. At the same time, in Damascus, there was a man named Ananias, who also had a vision. Now, Ananias was a follower of Jesus, and he had a vision, or perhaps a dream, where he was told that he needed to go find Saul so that he could heal him. Now, Ananias thought, what? I'm not going to go see this man. He's been so guilty for so long of slaying Christians and tormenting them. I don't want anything to do with him. Are you really sure? Are you really sure you want me to go meet up with him? Well, in the silence, he was told, yes, you need to go see Saul. You are the one that I am sending to heal him. And here's where you can find him, in the city of Damascus. So Saul, even though he wasn't sure he wanted to do this, Ananias went and found Saul, stood before him, placed his hands on his head, and immediately it was like scales fell off of his eyes, and he could see. After that, of course, Saul could no longer deny the reality of Jesus, the reality of the healing power, whether it came from within him or without of him. It was there. It was something that was undeniable. Well, Saul changed his name, which is something that happens in the Bible with great frequency. When people are willing to change their minds and be reborn, they take a new name. So Saul went on to become Paul, who was one of the followers of Jesus who actually wrote several of the books in the New Testament are attributed to him, perhaps wrongly, some of them, but anyway, he was really a great man, a great follower. Another book that I really love, that I used after the 12 Powers, is Divine Audacity by Reverend Linda Martella Whitsett. And she's the one who alerted me to the idea that compassion is the fruit of understanding. That what we ask for when we're ready to move into compassion from understanding, we can ask for the gift of insight. Sometimes if we have insight into why people act the way they do or do the things that they do that we are so convinced are wrong, we can, with insight, move into compassion. She tells the story of being in a grocery store parking lot one day and getting really annoyed because she watched a woman move her shopping bags from a cart into her car and then leave the cart just right there next to where her car was parked and drove away. Now, I'm sure none of you have ever had any experience like that. I unfortunately do it all the time. Parking lots seem to be a great place to learn lessons. My inner Girl Scout started twitching. My dutiful citizen persona reared its judgmental head, and I blasted this woman in my own mind for her selfish and rude behavior. Imagine if everyone left their carts anywhere they wanted in the parking lot. I bet you wouldn't be too happy to drive into the lot and find no place to park for all the carts left. I'll show you what it means to be a good citizen. I'll take the cart and place it where you should have placed it, in the designated cart holder. Stop. Take two. Activating my innate power of understanding, I sought to comprehend some of the benign reasons why someone would leave a grocery cart in a non-designated spot in a parking lot. I listened to my own life, remembering times when I was in an incredible hurry, perhaps with an ill child waiting at home for medicine, where a few more steps would seem exhausting at the end of a long day, or where I was so mentally fixated on a problem that I was in a total non-awareness state. Have I ever disregarded the rules? Have I ever forgotten to be kind and compassionate? Sometimes, I have to admit, I get so caught up in my own intellectual understanding of the way things should be, what those other people out there should be doing, that I totally forget that it has to start here within. That's where true compassion begins. And it can begin with insight and understanding. There's a great other little booklet. I've been reading a lot of Unity booklets the last few months, which is something I haven't done before, even though I've been a Unity teacher. I get these nice little booklets in the mail, and I think, oh, that looks good, and I'll order, 30 or 40 copies for everyone in the church. And then I put it on the shelf and forget it. But I've been really reading this one, a lot of them lately. For some reason, we seem to have more time these days. So this booklet is called Compassion, Living Life with an Open Heart. And there's a little chapter about understanding by Reverend Teresa Burton, subtitled, I don't know what's best for you. From a distance, I may believe that I know the facts of your life and think I know how to help or advise you regarding a troublesome situation. I might even indulge myself in judgments about you and the other people involved in, or maybe about the situation itself. When I truly understand, however, I act and speak with compassion. My innate wisdom lifts my understanding beyond outward circumstance to a deeper, more enduring reality. Seeking to understand gives me a blank slate and frees me from preconceived notions about you. Understanding humbles me and frees me from the notion that I know what's best for you, and instead encourages me to open my mind and heart to you. I think that's what we're being called on in the midst of the chaos that we're seeing outside of ourselves, out in the greater world. We're being called on to be more understanding, to be compassionate, to be willing to let go of our judgments, our thoughts of what should be happening, to practice, to be willing. I practice understanding when I look beyond your history or your actions and see your divine nature. This is certainly what Ananias did for Saul. He looked beyond his history and his actions and saw his divine nature. With my loving heart, I understand and behold the truth of your being and reflect it to you so you can know the truth as well. I feel like that is so much of what we try to do here at Unity of Missoula by being a loving and open community of people who are seeking to understand each other, who are seeking to truly be willing and ready and able to step up and to serve others. There's another side of that coin sometimes. We have to be willing and ready to accept help from other people. We are so often given challenges, and we think it's our job to move through those challenges all by ourselves. We forget that having a spiritual community means that we can reach out and ask. There's one more story from this booklet, The Heart of Healing, which I also really love. It was written with Karen Drucker, and every little section has a quote from Karen Drucker's song and a little explanation from her about how she came to write those songs and how she used them to help herself and others heal. This story is about a man who was married to another man. On June 14th, David held Steve's hand, wiped his brow, and spoke words of love and comfort for the last time. Cancer had come into their lives 6 years earlier and was now ready to leave, taking Steve with it. As David watched his husband, partner, and great love of 24 years and 6 months breathe his last breath, a new life began, his life as a widower. Hospice had been summoned days before, and there had been a steady stream of visitors bringing inspirational gifts and food, offering words of encouragement and sharing hugs and tears. Now it was time to finalize the funeral arrangements, attend to pressing financial matters, and maintain the machinery of daily life. I felt so bereft, David remembers. I wasn't sure I could get through it. The friends who loved and helped Steve to the end now helped David at the threshold of his new beginning. I had to call, David said, but people readily helped me when asked. They brought food for the Shiva, helped with clearing out our stuff, and checking in on me. Someone even found a company to remove a tree that had partially collapsed onto the house right before my husband died. As the days turned to weeks, David sought more support as he adjusted to life without Steve. A grief group helped him process his loss. Even though I had no personal connection to the other group members, being in that community allowed me to tell my story to a group of like-minded people, he said. It helped to share the rawness of my experience and to have that witnessed by people who were also on grief journeys. Having a caring, listening community helped David grow. The way I tell my story has changed. I used to start with the details of what Steve's diagnosis was, how he died. That evolved into sharing how I feel about him, and now how I have integrated him into who I am becoming. Broadening and deepening David's connections has done more than assuage his grief, he said. Losing Steve meant that I lost by witness. By opening myself to more people, I have more witnesses in my life. He no longer relies on one person to be everything to him. When Steve died, I felt like the fabric of my life tore apart and unraveled. Even if I tried, I could never reweave the fabric exactly the way it was. Having a supportive community has helped me weave a new fabric. And so that's what I wish and pray for all of us as a part of a spiritual community. That indeed we can move past the ego-centered place that we sometimes find ourselves. Move using our spiritual powers into a new understanding and moving through that into compassion. Compassion for ourselves, compassion for others. It was interesting to me how the three spiritual powers that were touched on again and again in these books were imagination, understanding, and will. And according to Charles Fillmore, they're all centered right up in the top of your brain, kind of almost right on top of each other. And I thought, boy, it's so interesting, because the first step often is to realize that something in your life isn't working. Whether it's, something's really causing you uneasiness, grief, anger. And when you recognize that and become willing to move out of that, you go from your will center into imagination. You can imagine what it would look like if it were different. You can start creating that different story for yourself. And then from imagining, we move into understanding. Sometimes with a great gift of insight. Oh, that's why that person did that. That's why this happened to me. Now I get it. Now I am willing to walk with the presence of God in my life. And so we're going to move into a time of meditation now. I invite you to listen for a few minutes to Karen Drucker's song. This is insight to me. The face of God. You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. or the face of love. I hold you in my heart. You are my family. You are the face of love. And so just hold this vision in your heart. That other person out there can become the face of God, the face of love. They can become your family, my family. You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. We breathe into this truth and know indeed no one is in our life by accident. Chance plays no part in bringing us together. We are here to be blessings to each other as we bless ourselves. If there is someone in your life that's causing you animosity or hatred or even just mild discomfort, I invite you to be willing to picture them, to see their face. It may begin as anger or upset or bitterness or fear. God, let's imagine it morphing and changing and becoming filled with light, as Saul did on the road to Damascus. We see this vision smiling and filled with peace as we are willing to let go of past history, past beliefs, past actions, and know indeed that that was the dream that we had. We can forgive and move into a new dream, a new place of understanding, a place indeed of compassion and love. It may take more than just a few minutes of meditation on one day to be able to melt that person's face in our hearts. But as we turn instead back to being here in this place right now, we can know that indeed we are willing to return again and again until we see the face of God, the face of love, and know that the reason that we see it is because it is us. And so I say thank you, thank you, thank you. Amen.